All right, Andrew, we've got you and Melissa on suspended death benefit cases. Hi, Melissa. And this item came up about the unpaid death benefit. I think the conversation was around what happens with that money when we have these unpaid death benefits. So that was my understanding, is that was sort of the background of this item coming up. So
That's correct. So it's recapped in your benefits and services agenda item 4 on BNS 10. And in April of last year, the board was presented with a report on outstanding death benefits. During that same meeting, the board delegated the authority for that report to the CEO, but several questions were raised around the information contained in that outstanding death benefit report. And then in the following meeting in June, additional questions surfaced and this agenda item was requested, and that's kind of how we landed here. So let me get the slides moving. I'm really pleased to be able to be here today. That was a hard act to follow with retirement readiness and Sandy Blair to come up next and talk about our death benefits. But I think I'm really grateful to be able to share this information with you and hopefully be responsive to the questions that you have on unpaid death benefits. It's not a topic that we're as eager to discuss, but it's equally important, and it's our charge in survivor benefits to further the mission of CalSTRS by protecting and administering the future after the future, which is the retirement of our members. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We'll start with the overview. We'll dive deeper into the outstanding death benefits payable, and then we'll also discuss a little more about how we outreach and educate our members about the survivor benefits programs, and we'll end on some of the future design that we're looking at with respect to pension solution. So in survivor benefits, really the crux of what we do and what's important for us is ensuring that we're providing accurate, timely, and compassionate service delivery to our beneficiaries. That's always a challenging time, and people are experiencing a range of emotions. And so the way that we deliver the benefits and services that are offered is really important. Additionally, we are also always striving to pay attention to the industry and to the needs of our customers and evolving our delivery in a way that's aligned with those needs. So what is survivor benefits? We pay a number of different types of benefits. You can see on this slide that we have one-time death benefits, we have ongoing monthly benefits, we pay benefits for our defined benefit program, as well as the cash balance and defined benefit supplement. All of these different benefit types result in over 40 different types of survivor benefits that are paid on the allowance roll every month. Each survivor benefits case can have multiple beneficiaries because members are able to choose multiple beneficiaries for their one-time death benefits. Their accounts, they may have also elected an option beneficiary and chosen to reduce their monthly benefit in order to provide an ongoing monthly benefit in the event of their death. And so additionally, we can be paying dependent children on survivor benefits. So that is the reason why we have so many varieties of death benefits that are payable. So this little diagram is the simplest view that we could provide about how a notification of death really trickles through CalSTRS. The notification of death is what initiates all of the work that's done in survivor benefits. And I'm going to talk about each one of these areas, starting with notification of death and how that rolls into the actively worked cases. And ultimately, it will result in either a payment, or if we're unable to make a payment, we will suspend the processing of that case. And so we'll talk a little bit more about each of these. Although this is a simple illustration, you can imagine there's a lot of complexity behind it. So our death notifications. There are many ways in which we can receive death notifications. The most common are the direct notices, which come in through our contact center. We also have individuals have the ability to also submit a notification of death on our calstrs.com website. And our education code requires that we pay retirement benefits only up through during the member's lifetime, excuse me. So we are not able to pay a retirement benefit on the date of death or after. So we are very proactive about looking for unreported deaths to ensure that we're in compliance with our law and not overpaying benefits. That's where the indirect notifications of death come in. We use a third-party verification service to provide death match services so that in the event we have a death that has not been reported, we can take that into account, stop the prior benefit, and ensure that we prepare to provide any death benefits that are payable to beneficiaries.
I've got a question
Sure.
from Dana. Go ahead, Dana. You might be asking the same question I'm asking, which is, how do we know if it's in the...
So we don't pay the date of the death?
I'm sorry, it's through the date of the death.
Through the date
Yes,
of the death? So
yes.
it'd be payment stop the day after. Got it.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Melissa, I was just sort of, the question of how do we know, so if somebody dies and we are not notified directly from the family,
Right. So
how and when do we find out about it?
Well, the largest population of indirect notifications comes from our third-party verification service. So at periodic times during the month, we send a list to this third-party death match service provider, and they let us know if they have a reported death that lines up with somebody who's on our payroll. And then we stop payments if there's a high level of confidence that it's accurate, and we will follow up to ensure whether the report that we've received from that third party is accurate.
And the third party goes to, like, I don't know, city and county records or something?
It pulls data from the Social Security Administration death match primarily, but they also, this third party also searches obituaries, and they have other sources of data as well.
Oh, hang on a second. Go ahead, Karen.
It's still kind of, so if our members, say, taught here, but moved to another state and had a death there, so you're saying that the third-party verification would notify CalSTRS about that death?
If it's picked up in their system.
Okay,
So there are some states that are not as free with reporting their deaths as California. And so, but if the third party has received that information, they will let us know that they have a match with an individual who's on our payroll. And that triggers us to do some more investigating to determine whether that member or beneficiary is still alive.
and the third party is a company?
Yes,
Okay, it's a company that we contract with?
correct.
Okay, and then they use various sources and databases for that?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So this slide shows some of the metrics on our death notifications, and all of this data is for the last fiscal year, 2016-17. You can see that we received over 9,000 notifications of death, which results in, or equates to, an average of 752 notifications per month. Actually, I'm going to go back for a second. Currently, in this fiscal year, we are averaging about 800 deaths per month, and in January we received over 1,000, which was our highest recorded month so far.
Recorded months so far
In history.
in the history of
Yes.
CalSTRS?
And those numbers just continue to increase. We worked with our actuary office last year doing some research, and based on the 2016 valuation, which was current at that time, they've indicated that the expected trend is just to continue going up over the next 15 years, which is the duration of the data that was provided at that time.
Oh, interesting. Dana?
Is that due to the numbers that we have that are, the baby boomers that are aging? I mean, is,
It is due to the aging population,
and the numbers that we have.
right?
Do we ever juxtapose the numbers, the new members coming in with the members that we have that have passed per year?
What you're asking?
So like, if we're averaging 1,000, so that's 10,000, say,
Oh, I see.
maybe 1,200, well, 12,000. Do we have, so we have 12,000 that are leaving the system, but we had 20,000 come in? I mean, have we ever taken a look at what that trend has been like?
I would imagine that the actuaries are looking at
That's what I was looking over at David.
have that information.
Because we heard yesterday that we increased our new teacher population by what, 10,000 last year?
No, we do. As you know, us actuaries, we love to look at numbers.
There you go, absolutely.
So we spend a lot of time looking at trends and how many do we expect that will die, that will retire, that will just simply leave the teaching profession. So you're right, we generally see a good 20 to 25,000 teachers leaving no longer teaching at the end of every single year, either because they've retired, some have died, some just leave the profession. So we keep track of this. And in fact, all of the assumptions you adopted last year kind of reflect kind of all of the trends that we see over time.
Do we have that many people coming in every year?
We've-
So it's
we've
like a zero-sum,
Actually, the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen an overall growth in our membership and the number of active teachers. But generally, as an assumption, what you've adopted as a board is that our population is going to remain stable, the active population. So when someone leaves active teaching, we assume they're going to be replaced by a new teacher.
right, I totally understand the whole assumption part, but are we tracking the actual numbers?
Yes,
Okay.
we are.
So if that trend was to turn around, we'd have visibility of it?
You would have
Or if there were less new members coming in, then we're no
Correct.
longer being served?
We would, yeah.
Okay,
David,
thank
do
you,
you
David.
remember the number? Yesterday you told us, and I thought I wrote it down somewhere, of the new teachers from last year.
So we added close to 10, I think we went from
10,000, right?
437 to 445,000 over a year. So, and it's been kind of what we've seen the last few years.
And Dana, when you mentioned baby boomers, the trend being due to baby boomers, the oldest baby boomers are only in their early 70s.
Oh, good.
So I think it's the previous generation
Okay.
that is aging out of the system.
Super, thank you.
Well, the silent generation. Hi, Melissa.
I thought I was on the low end of the boat, maybe. I was hoping I was anyhow.
So those notifications of death then feed into what my team's active cases that our teams are researching and interacting with the beneficiaries to get the information we need to be able to pay these benefits. Again, here, although we have 3 very basic steps listed there is a lot behind the analysis that goes into determining to how much and to whom to pay these benefits. It involves assessing our education code requirements around eligibility. It can involve application of probate code. And ultimately, when we have what we need, we're making a decision about payment authorization. And if we don't, as I mentioned earlier, the case will be suspended pending further information. And I would like to just pause for a moment to acknowledge the staff that we have that work on these cases. Right now, we have a team of about 30 individuals, and as you can imagine, every day, all day, they're working through death benefit cases. And we have a team of really committed individuals who care about the mission of this organization. They care about our members, and they understand clearly how that translates into the work that they do to support the beneficiaries through this process and to make sure that they get any benefits that are due to them. I think, it's not the happy path of CalSTRS. We have a lot of other happier paths, but you have a real strong team who is committed to quality in their service delivery. So still talking about case analysis and determining who benefits are payable to. Again, here's some numbers for you. In fiscal year 16-17, over 9,000 cases were reviewed, which resulted in more than 22,000 requests for information being sent. And again, the reason for the difference in those two numbers is because on each one of those cases, there are often multiple beneficiaries, and so there's different communication going to each one of them. The communication with the beneficiaries, we start off with an initial request letter, and the kinds of information that we share are what types of benefits are payable, what are the amounts, are there any receivables that are due back to CalSTRS as a result of an overpayment of benefits, and what specific documentation or information is needed in order to pay the case. So once we have all of that information, we are ready for a decision, or once we've received all of the information we can get. And so first we're going to go down the path of authorizing a payment. What did I do? I'm having a user error with this clicker here. The vast majority of the time, what am I doing it again? Okay, the vast majority of the time we have all of the information that we're needed and we're able to pay the benefits. Some more stats for you. In fiscal year 16-17, we had almost 23,000 different payments issued. We initiated 1,900 option allowances, and again, that's the when the member chooses to reduce their own benefit in order to provide an ongoing lifetime benefit for somebody else. And all of those payments were made to over 22,000, almost 28 or 23,000 benefit recipients, totaling over $100 million in benefit payments. So we have some service level objectives that you all have seen in the form of the stoplight chart for survivor benefits. We have two that we report to the board. The first is really a measure of how quickly we are resolving the cases once we receive the notification, all of the information necessary. In fiscal year 16-17, we achieved 89% of that 90% target. And year to date so far for this year, we're at 96%. And this slide represents the current year and the last 3 years of attainment on that same service level objective. So our second objective is to establish 85% of the ongoing survivor benefit allowance. These are the options again within 30 days of notification of death. And the intent of this objective is really to ensure that there's no income disruption to the beneficiary, who is often a spouse or another family member. For fiscal year 16-17, we achieved 93%. And you'll see that for this current year, we're at 74%. And the reason for the dip here is that we changed our practice. We previously erred on the side of service and would initiate the option as soon as we were able to validate that the demographic data for the beneficiary, we knew where they lived, we knew where they wanted their money sent. What we would do that prior to having the death certificate, and now we've modified our process because we think it's a better control to have the death certificate first. And so you're seeing the dip in this service level objective. However, the majority of these options are still initiated within 45 to 60 days of the notification of death. We have recommended modifying this objective for the next fiscal year to actually reflect what we can measure based on when we have how soon the option is initiated once we have all of the information that's necessary. However, we're going to continue to track this objective so that we have a view into the customer experience in terms of how long it takes from the date of notification to when they receive their option benefit. And again, is the current and last 3 years of attainment on the service level objective. Okay, so we've talked about how the notification of death comes in, what our teams do to resolve and pay the case. And now we're going to move to when we're unable to pay the case because we have not received all of the information. So if after several attempts of working with the beneficiaries to get the documents doesn't result, or the information doesn't result in us having what we need, whether it be a death certificate or election choices from the beneficiary, we will suspend the case. So what does suspend mean? It's really just suspending any ongoing activity because there are no other leads for us at that time. It doesn't prevent the beneficiary from coming forward or from submitting the information in the future when it becomes available. It essentially takes it off of the open caseload of our staff so that they can focus on the cases where there is information coming in and there's activity. An average of right around 10% of the cases that we receive per month are suspended in a month. However, many of those cases subsequently come out of suspense once we receive the information that's needed to proceed. So I've talked a little bit about why we suspend cases. Really, the two primary reasons are we are unable to locate the beneficiary, or for multiple reasons, we just haven't received the information that we need to be able to validate and pay the case. Sure.
So Andrew, you probably will be able to answer this better. When we finally have the Neospin product totally installed, I imagine that system's going to be able to kick out notifications for a whole lot of different reasons. Are we taking a look at what Neospin could do to reach out to the last listed beneficiary and to try to get information as an automatic notification?
We are, and you'll see the slide at the end when we're talking about pension solution, we are definitely looking to automate notifications and alerts as much as we possibly can in Neospin.
Melissa, I apologize for getting ahead of you.
No, it's okay. You can ask a question anytime.
Melissa is the chair of the Pension Solutions Steering Committee and is pretty
there you
heavily
go.
involved in the project.
Perfect.
Okay, so I do want to emphasize that really the suspend is more of an internal way that we handle our cases and ensure that our teams are working on the cases that have something to follow. It doesn't prevent a beneficiary from getting the monies that are due to them. And before we do suspend a case, we are making every good faith effort to ensure that we've followed up on any lead that we have to pay the case. Okay, so now we're going to start getting closer to the unpaid death benefits. This chart here is intended to show the complete universe, if you will, of cases paid compared to those that are suspended. The time frame for this slide and the next several slides is the same. It's 2001 through 2017. The reason we chose that date is because 2001 is when we went live with our current pension administration system start, and it's the best data that we really have right now. So you can see that the majority of the death benefit cases we receive end up being paid. This chart is the same data, it's just showing the dollar value of those benefits instead of the case count. For the paid amount, those are actual values that were paid on those cases, but for the suspended dollar values, we had to estimate because we never really know for certain until we pay the case what the amount payable will be. So that estimated suspended value is based on historical data on the average amounts of one-time death benefits and contributions and interest paid to both retirees and active death account cases. So there's an education code that requires CalSTRS to report to the board monthly on outstanding death benefits payable that are beyond 6 months from the notification of death. And this education code is what triggered the report that you all saw last year that generated these questions. So this next chart is moving towards identifying those cases over the 6 months. So again, we have the complete universe of cases paid, but we're also showing the cases that are over 6 months old. And so that would include the same dollar value for the suspended amount, the $60 million, and there are a handful of cases that are still actively being worked by our team that are open, on the open caseload, with an estimated value of about $3 million. So again, you can see that by comparing what's outstanding in over 6 months to the dollar value and the percentage that CalSTRS paid, we pay most of our death benefits.
The ed code language, so it says reporting to the board monthly. How do we, because we get an annual report, is that right? So
Yeah, the report gets posted to the board website pretty much on a quarterly basis. We collect the information monthly, just in terms of, how often we meet and the conversations that we've had, we've decided to go ahead and post that on your board website quarterly.
But then do we get an annual report on this? or-
Also posted to the board website.
So it's not something, I guess my question is, do we, on an annual basis in benefits and services, I should know this as the chair, but do we hear about these statistics once a year, or is it just posted on our website?
Posted on the website, and if that's something that you would like, a little bit more visibility into, we can definitely talk about that, especially as we get into the work plan.
Okay, that sounds good. I've got a couple folks in line here. Dana?
So if our practice is going to be different than what ed code is that something that can be taken care of in a technical housekeeping bill? Did we change from monthly to quarterly or something like that?
I will follow up with governmental relations and see if we can do that.
Thanks.
Okay.
That was my question.
Yeah. You get where we're going, right? I mean, the language says monthly, and so it just seems like to be consistent with ed code. I mean, how are we being consistent with ed code?
Then I just have one other, I'm sorry,
Oh,
one
go
other
ahead, go
thing.
ahead. Yep.
Then if it's posted on the website now,
The board
quarterly,
website.
the board website, the
Yes.
board website,
That's correct.
do we get like an email saying that this has been done?
No, my recollection of our previous conversation was that, during my benefits and services executive officer report, I would let the committee know when those reports
Okay.
have been posted to the board website.
Okay, I must have missed those.
That's okay. So one recommendation I would have is when we get to the draft agenda, we can discuss how this committee
that'll work.
wants to receive that information. Do we want to receive it annually in Andrew's report, or how we want to do that? So let's make sure
let's
we
go.
bring that up. Go ahead, Melissa.
All right, so I'm going to move to the next slide. And this is, let me go back. So again, paid compared to the dollar value for those cases over 6 months. And you're going to see this move to the side, and we're pulling out that slice, which is the cases that are over 6 months old. And the arrow moving to the right is intended to show that the green circle is now all of the cases over 6 months old. A portion of them are currently still being worked and are on the open caseload. That's 5% of all of the cases that are unpaid and over 6 months from notification of death. And then this next slide is just to show that it's the same representation in dollar value and percentage I only included this chart because this is how it appeared in the board report that you saw last April. So my point with all of this is I hope you see that CalSTRS is working really hard to pay out all the benefits that we can. And although we would love to see the unpaid death benefits be next to nothing, a great portion of those benefits are being paid. So what are we doing to try to pay those benefits? Initially, as I mentioned, we always make a good faith effort to get them paid as soon as possible. We initiated in the last year a project called Person Locator. So for those suspended cases that were in that status because we were unable to locate a beneficiary, we did a sweep of those cases. We used a third-party demographic data verification service to help us look for current address information for those individuals. And although that effort was initiated about a year ago, so far it's helped us to resolve an additional 160 cases or so. So we'll continue to pursue that to the extent that it yields results. We're always monitoring for the receipt of the information that is outstanding. And coming soon is CalSTRS unclaimed property page that will display or provide a way for not only unpaid death benefits, but other populations. There's required minimum distribution and uncashed warrants that will also be placed there. We're still working on the design and the requirements and what that functionality will look like, but we expect our target for that is a release later this fall. And there have been some questions too about what happens with the dollars that are still sitting in the system. And the answer is that they're reserved so that when the beneficiaries come forward, we are able to pay the beneficiaries the benefits that are due to them. It stays in the fund until paid.
So Melissa, they're in a fund just sitting somewhere? They're not collecting interest, or there's no, I'm just curious more about so they're just kind of in a fund somewhere in our
They're
system.
in the teacher retirement fund, and I won't, Lucy may want to speak
I'm
more
just, I guess I'm always
specifically.
curious. I'm always like, money sitting there not collecting interest. What?
So EDCO did say that if the money hasn't gone out, it goes back to the teacher's retirement fund and it does earn interest.
It does earn interest.
I mean, it's not separated in a separate appropriation. It just goes back to the teacher's retirement fund and invested with
Okay.
our pool of investments.
Great. That's what I wanted to hear. Okay. Thank you, Lucy. Karen.
Thank you. That was really good. And I had an opportunity to talk with Melissa, about some of the concerns that I had, because that was one of the big things at my first meeting. So thank you. I just have a couple of questions that when you talk about the documentation that's needed for the beneficiaries out there, what kind of documents besides the death certificate are some common ones that are needed?
It could be a marriage certificate. It can be the distribution election, how they want to receive the money that's due to them, those kinds of items.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you didn't mention this, but I tell this to all my retired teacher friends that there's an important document called the recipient designation form. And some of them, I know one of my friends does not want to do that because of the fact that that means that something's going to happen to her later, right? And so she doesn't really want to face the fact that she has to admit to that. So I just want to make sure that in doing that, in doing some of the outreach, that we do say how important that is, because they're here now to fill that out. But afterwards, nothing, and that's part of the reason why you can't find anybody, right? Your beneficiaries.
That's an excellent point, and Sandy and I have had conversations about, when we do have an opportunity to start developing those retired member educational services, one of them would be that kind of end-of-life paperwork and the importance of filling it out, just for the very reason that you said. I mean, sometimes people are superstitious or, just have, difficult feelings dealing with this topic. And so, demystifying it and talking about it at an earlier point in retirement, I think would be helpful.
And we do communicate about the importance of the beneficiary designation form. I have one slide on it in just a couple more, but I did want to talk about how we do that. We regularly put articles in our various newsletters. There's information on calstrs.com. We do periodic targeted emails to those whose email addresses that we have, specifically if they don't have a designation form on file.
Did you have other questions?
Yeah, just one more thing. You talked briefly about the suspense period that the cases are in, and you said about 6 months, and then you kind of put it into like a closed, semi-closed file until the needed documentation is received. Did I hear that right?
It's close to that. So the cases are actively worked. Once we've exhausted our due diligence, then we suspend any additional activity, only because there's nothing else for us to do at that point. It's not there's no 6-month cutoff for that. It depends on, it just depends on how, we will do three attempts. If we get nothing back, then we will suspend a case. So we exhaust our due diligence. It's not driven by months or a timeline. It's driven by whether we're able to make progress on the case.
That 6-month period relates to what Melissa showed you in the education code. So we need to report to the board anything that's unpaid after 6 months. The actual case process can go on for several months after that before the staff determine that it's not payable and needs to move into suspense. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then just one more thing. You mentioned in the next steps that the unclaimed property program or attempt or
It'll be a
website
webpage.
or whatever you want to call it. Would that be similar to what the state controller does for unclaimed?
Yes, it will be similar. I don't know that it will be the exact same functionality.
Okay, but I mean,
it will
on
be
the
similar.
same kind of idea?
Yes.
Okay, all right,
Yes.
good, thank you.
Sure. I wanted to highlight a couple things that you brought up, Karen, that I think are really important. One is it's a suspend file, not a closed file. So I think that's the language that we use is important because that means that at any point, even though the money is there collecting interest, at any point that if there's a change and that we are able to track down the member, that money gets to them. And then I think the other thing that we don't talk very much about, but I think is really critical, is what you're raising around. I do think, including myself, or just, my father passed away this year, and there's such an emotional, there's so much kind of, whether it's denial or it's just the superstition, like you're saying, I find, we talk here so matter-of-factly about things, which I think is good, because it is, in my mind now, it is matter-of-fact. It's just a piece of paper that makes sure that your loved ones aren't actually, sort of knee-deep in a bunch of bureaucracy. It actually is a loving thing to do, to fill out paperwork. It's actually a way to love the people that in your family. But I do think that's a barrier, and I think it's something that I know we have counselors, but it's almost like a whole, that counseling definition is a lot broader than just informing people. It's really saying this is a loving act to sign your name on this piece of paper. I have to confess, I just did my one-time beneficiary like 2 years ago. I've been on this board for 6 years, and it wasn't like an emotional thing. It was more, I just didn't do it kind of thing. But whether it's, you just don't pay attention to it because you think, oh, I'll live forever. Or it's something,
How many people have not done that?
I know.
I just went to a recent retirement luncheon, and I took a whole stack of those just in case. And, because like Pat was saying, people were saying yesterday that a lot of people aren't computer literate or they do things online or anything. So I just took paper, and that stack was gone. Because they said, we better take one of these. So I really urge people out there to.
Clearly, Karen needs to be a counselor's counselor.
I couldn't do it, I cry all the time.
important points of, and these are conversations that we're having. Sandy Blair and I spoke recently about how we can ensure that we're integrating the planning for your future beyond retirement into the outreach and education efforts. Do we want it to be the focal point of the benefits planning specialist sessions? Probably not. We want to focus on the retirement, but we want to make sure that it's incorporated. And as Sandy mentioned, as they start to roll out the retiree modules and enhance the outreach and education to our retirees, we'll see that increase as well. So thank you for, sharing your thoughts on
I
that.
also wondered, Jack, about the staff, Melissa, as you highlight the intensity and kind of, I think, the emotional intensity for our staff at counselors in this building who are dealing with that, as you said, like day in, day out, every day. I often wonder about how do we rotate positions sometimes, or even people that work in the call center? I mean, is there a way to sort of be on calls for 4 hours and then do something different I just think about my life, and I deal with solving problems 24/7 with people. And it does, you just realize you have to manage your stress in some ways or deal with the emotional nature of it and not let it affect your own personal life and, your fitness and all those things. And I wonder how that's a bigger conversation, but like, especially in your area, I would just imagine, I feel thankful, but also, want to be concerned about making sure, 8 hours a day of that could be really taxing on our employees.
I'm very cognizant of
Yeah,
that.
I'm sure you are.
You know that the two areas that I am overseeing are disability and survivor benefits. And both of those, the work in those areas it can be very similar. This is where I will give great kudos to our leadership team in disability and survivor benefits and just the culture of CalSTRS, because this culture really supports wellness and balance. And I can say that for disability and survivor benefits, we've seen a shift over the years in our ability to retain staff. And I attribute that to the strong leadership in our area, where they recognize, it starts from hiring and selection and recruitment, and ensuring that we're clear about what the job entails and that we're screening for qualities that are amenable to the kind of situation that we're in. But we try to create a fun environment too, and we do a lot of cross-training and try to offer stretch assignments so that people do get some variety. We want to retain the talent and expertise within the division and benefits and services and CalSTRS when folks are ready to move on to something else. And we recognize that people aren't always going to be able to do this work for 10 years. So we've adjusted our business practices to account for those, for the situation.
Well, there's so much joy too, I think. I mean, you're celebrating, even though people are dying. I mean, I think about my dad and I'm like, God, he was such a great man. And we kind of had a celebration of his life at his funeral. It wasn't a sad occasion. And I would imagine for a lot of the people that work in your area, it's also a celebration of these amazing teachers. They live forever, as we hear from our actuaries, and they have these amazing lives of service. So to me, but again, I work with a lot of problems, and so I need to go run with my dog and just sort of like decompress or just do things to help counter that. So I'm glad to hear we're doing that, and so thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Karen, did you have something else, or are you done? Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
So I think that you all spoke to this, the importance of this slide. I probably don't need to address it a whole lot more, but it is important for our members to complete the beneficiary designation form. However, if they don't, we will pay the benefits to their estate. That can be more difficult and take more time, but
It's gone through probate, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm asking,
If
does
something's
that,
gone through probate, you probably get to do it after probate?
Actually, I'm gonna turn to.
sorry, lawyers.
I'm looking at my,
I assume it's if they have a trust or something established.
if they have a
don't.
trust established, they can pay directly
Right,
to.
If we don't have a beneficiary on file, we pay the estate regardless of whether or not the estate goes through probate.
Okay.
There you go.
Irina. Okay, and then moving along, I've talked about the targeted outreach efforts, quarterly email blasts, particularly for newly enrolled members and retirees that do not have a designation on file. And then pension solution, we've talked about this a little bit. We're really working to automate communication.
Gonna make life better.
Right now, everything is, aside from the email blast, is pretty manual. We're also looking to streamline our staff processes by having improved data up front. We'll be able to pay these benefits much more expediently, and it will reduce our manual processes. And then again, with the recipient designation forms, we'll be doing targeted notifications. So just to sum it up, you know what we've covered. I hope that I will leave you with a better understanding of what that outstanding death benefit payable report means, and that you understand that, or you have a better context for that, knowing that more than about 93% out of that whole universe of our death benefits are being paid, and that there's diligent work occurring to ensure that we pay those that are still outstanding. I think that's about it. So if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
I think we tapped out, Melissa. I think you're good. So just for me, it looked like it was about $60 million last year. That's sort of in this suspense account, right? Is that typical? I mean, is it about $60 million a year that we have sort of that's unclaimed?
That amount is a collective
Is that
aggregate
aggregate?
amount. It wasn't just for 1 year.
That was for 16.
Everything that's suspended, been
17.
suspended since 2001.
Okay, that's helpful. Great, thank you, Melissa. Thank you for being responsive to the questions that we had from last April. So thank you. That was really helpful. All right, Brian? You gonna explain probate to us, or what? Speaking of things that are on my list to do, I need to set up my living,
To be nice, I
living
only
trust.
have a $2,000 death benefit. I wanted to address the education code section that you saw that talked about monthly report. For those of you who perhaps weren't on the board 2 years ago, you engaged in a process of reports to the boards and committees. Went through a whole inventory, worked with Andrew. You had a couple of these reports that you're supposed to get monthly. You don't meet monthly. You have a website. You also have the power under the education code to delegate every single thing that you do. And so where you reached, the point you reached was that staff would look at the report on a monthly basis, and they would accumulate it and give it to you quarterly. So what you really did was you delegated the monthly review of the board to executive management. So I just want to make sure that the record was clear that you are in compliance with the statute.
You could sense our.
I could, and I wanted the record to be clear.
Thank you, Brian.
As usual, Brian, you covered us. Thank
Keep us on
you.
the up and up.
We always need these reminders of where we've come from, right, and where we're headed, so, great. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so Andrew, we're gonna look at the, oh, sorry, go ahead, Pat. For some reason, I'm not
I
looking
just
at-
was asking, and I got my answer. I said, do you ask for social security numbers? Because in my situation, when I filled out my beneficiary form, the addresses, of course, now are all incorrect, and they would never be paid. And I was informed that you are going to be asking for the social security numbers of the beneficiaries, and so that would be an excellent way to trace those names. Thank you.
Pat. All right, Andrew, let's look at the work plan for 18-19.
Okay, so if you look at the work plan, we have items slated for the July, September, November, and May meetings. Yesterday, in your interest rate conversation, there was a topic about bringing a review of board policy related to interest rates back, and we're looking at doing that in September. So I'll add that to the agenda for September.
The other thing I would add, do you want to add, is that really to this?
Can you let Paul know that, seeing as that was Paul
Yes.
was interested in that?
Yes.
He has a heads up for September?
Yeah, I'm not sure he's on this committee,
I
but,
told him already.
No, but I mean, if he wants to sit in on it, okay.
I let him know yesterday. Yeah,
Right.
no worries. But
And
yeah,
then
you
we
can
need
notify him
to
too.
integrate the SBMA piece that we discussed as
I
well.
was just gonna mention that. So we chatted yesterday about the SBMA data to help us, since we kind of left that conversation in an open dialogue, I believe is the phrase we used. So, how do you wanna do
Yeah,
that, Jack?
we've got two pieces, I think. One is the data piece, just to frame the issue right, and we'll proceed to disseminate the report that we presented to you yesterday as required. But then the other piece is what comes out of stakeholder conversations. And I assume, Dana, that you would probably want to use the vehicle you've set up with stakeholders to have that conversation, not a new independent stream. Right. So I think we want to integrate that into your agenda that you're doing with the broader stakeholder group. And so there's no reason, we would not, I would think we'd want to use September and November to bring that into some clarity if we're thinking of presenting an idea for 19. Those would be the 2 months to do that. So I would just flag those 2 months to see if we have some consensus.
Okay. Does that work, Andrew? One suggestion I'd have is I think maybe we can coordinate, is Diane Grant's here? Maybe we could coordinate with our stakeholder groups, with the meetings that Dana, Harry, and I are having, and make sure that we have David and that maybe the actuary team, so we have them at one of those meetings in the next few months, that we have them to have that conversation about the SBMA. Does that sound good?
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah.
Any other input from the committee members for the work plan? I think we've got plenty to do this next year.
Yes.
Any additions,
And
Andrew?
to the extent that you wanted anything else on the survivor benefit piece, is there anything you feel like we needed to add to the work plan, or are we clear on that?
Just maybe an update if there's any on that, the next steps part, the unclaimed property part. Is that appropriate, or is that
Sure, I mean,
gonna be in the future?
it's in progress, and I don't know if that means in progress as in pension solution in progress in the next couple years, or if that's
Just
something.
the status
The
of that
property
maybe?
webpage will go up. I'm not exactly sure when, but it will be before pension solution goes live.
If that happens in the next year,
Yeah.
let's hear about it. How's that?
For sure. Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Karen. All right, thanks, Andrew. All right, and your report.
Okay, so I'll make
Item
those
7.
adjustments to the work plan. You'll see that for the July meeting when you approve all of the work plans. In terms of what I have to report, I got a correction from staff on the number of direct report employers. Dana, you mentioned that yesterday. My guess was a little low. We are currently at 72. So there are 72 direct report sources, and of course, 1,750 approximately employers. Pardon?
What does that mean?
Direct reports, so those
Yeah,
are the,
direct
essentially the
reports.
county offices of ed and
Okay.
some of the, like LAUSD, some of the larger independent schools or districts.
Got it, okay.
Then also, we had on the work plan, and this was from our conference call about the work plan, impacts of implementation of pension solution on service levels. And that's something that, you don't see on this year's work plan, but will most likely come to next year's work plan. And the item that we have slated for July on business transformation will speak to some of the change management efforts that we have going on in the building related to pension solution, as that is critical for successful implementation. Then I think that's all I have to report. Yeah.
Review for information requests. Gina, I'm sorry, you're new to me, so I'm trying to see your name and the chair's in the way, but anyway, Gina, right? Okay.
I don't have any new information requests.
And we captured the information for our work plan on SBMA and interest, the policy on interest. Great, all right, so item 8 is the draft agenda for our next committee meeting. You can take a look at that. And it sounds like even the new items we're adding will be more in September, so. All right. And do we have any opportunities for statements from the public? Anybody from the public want to say anything? Seeing none, I will adjourn benefits and services. Thanks, everyone. When do you want to start audits, Joy? How about 5 minutes? So at 10:10, we'll start audits.